Let's talk about why I've got this watch, a Bell & Ross Aviation GMT. Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville, and my latest in my series of Why This Watch. What we're talking about today is the Bell & Ross Aviation GMT. One of the things I'd noticed is I recorded the audio for a lot of these all in one sitting, and I've subsequently made the videos in quite a different order. So the first thing you'll note is that I talk a bit about my last two videos, and that turns out they're not actually my last two. I've done another couple in between them. So if you are watching these all in a hurry, that's probably going to be a bit confusing. I say that this was the last watch I bought. As it turns out, it's not. I've bought one since then. So like I said, let that one roll over you. The other thing which I should say is when I'm recording these, I don't script them. I don't really research them. I sit in front of a microphone looking at the watch and just recording my thoughts. And then after the fact, it's really interesting going back and seeing what was important to me. What did I bother talking about? And the Bell & Ross was interesting. It's the first time I've actually addressed concerns that might be outside myself. In this case, concerns about authenticity and whether this watch is a knockoff of other watches relying on their fame to get through or not. Spoiler alert, it's not. It's a beautiful watch that stands on its own, and the fact that it has some obvious influences from other watches is irrelevant to why I love it, and hence I'm going to talk about that in the video. But it was just curious that even I felt it was odd that struck me. Probably says something about the way that notion, that idea of a, God forbid, I hate this word, homage, has infected the whole watch community and really does act as a poison in our system. So yeah, I thought that was worth noticing, and I thought I'd bring that out. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy the latest episode in why this watch. So why is the Bell & Ross Aviation GMT my watch? Funnily enough, the previous two of these Why This Watch episodes I've done were looking at my first two watches, the first two that really got me into this hobby. This watch is, at the time of doing this episode, the very last watch I've bought. And so I'm looking at this in some ways with more education, with more understanding, but fundamentally, if you ask me why have I bought this watch, my answer isn't that much better. It's just like, well, look at it. It's gorgeous. Everything starts with the case in this case, whether it's the shape or the proportions or the finishing, that's that fixed bezel with that super clean steel lines. I just adore this watch. This is definitely not a watch for people who go through life driving by the rear vision mirror. This is very much a forward-looking, what is the future going to bring me kind of watch. And that is something I absolutely love about it. Moving from the case down into the dial, look, I love the numerals, I love the font and the finish and the kind of It's on one hand, if you get really close, you'll see it's a brushed finish, but from a distance, it's such a light brush that you get a satin kind of glow from it, which I love. You get that same glow from it's not a glisten, it's not a shine like you get on, say, my Alpina, but you get this glow from the indices, which I think is fantastic. This has quite possibly the single best date integration I've come across so far. I'm not one, I just don't care about symmetry and all that sort of thing in general when it comes to date implementations. I want a date implementation. The best one is a date that doesn't mess with the rest of the dial, that doesn't get in the way. So you don't lose an indice or you don't lose a numeral. That's the very best date, and one that doesn't, as I say, detract from the overall feeling. And this one doesn't. If you have to have a date, I want one that, unless you're looking for it, you don't even see. And then when you do look for it, you can find it. I don't care if I have to look a bit more carefully. So this date is just perfect. And take all of that and throw it against that absolutely flat, matte, black background, and it's just stunning. Knowing more about watches now than I did back then, I actually did have to think about some things I didn't think about back then. The most obvious one when it comes to Bell & Ross are its references to other watches. I did think about, how do I feel about the fact that the numerals are just a little bit Panerai? How did I feel about the fact that that orange GMT hand is just a little bit Rolex Explorer? How did I feel about those exposed screws being just a little bit Royal Oak? In some ways, what I was experiencing was what I think I would, jumping to a completely different discipline. Harold Bloom, a literature critic, would talk about the anxiety of influence, the concern that what I'm producing or what I'm consuming is too reliant on what other people have done in the past. What I have to constantly remember is that nothing is ever new. Absolutely everything you ever see builds upon what came before it. So the question is, has that what came before, has that been used or has it been weaponized? Is the watch beautiful and it has influences from other watches, or is the watch simply relying on those influences in order to be beautiful? I'm absolutely convinced, I am certain that this watch does not need those things. It does not need hands that look a little bit Rolex, does not need screws that look a little bit Royal Oak, does not need numerals that looks a little bit Panerai in order to be beautiful. I think the fundamentals of this watch make it a stunning, stunning piece. And what the designer's done, they have cleverly used some influences to even further punch through, to even further elevate this. I think this is an absolutely gorgeous watch, and every time I look at it, every time I look at it in my watch box, I wonder, why aren't I wearing it today? Maybe it's because it's my newest one. Maybe this will wear off. But right now, I think this is just one of the best looking watches available on the market at any price. And that's why it's mine. And so that's it. That is why I own a Bell & Ross Aviation GMT. I sort of looked back on, or listened back to the audio in making this video. And yeah, I clearly was gushing over it. Now, interestingly, spoiler alert, I recorded that audio about 6 weeks before I'm making this video, and nothing has changed. I still love this watch, and every time I look at it in the box, I find myself thinking, why the hell aren't I wearing it today? And then I put it next to the one I'm wearing, and I remember, because I like to move things around. I like to shift things up. But yeah, I love this piece, and I think that comes through. Anyway, I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches, and I'll see you later. Bye.